We all love them. One of the best things to watch to get your adrenaline boosted, and it's one of the best options for a first date. Pansy Red Tips 101. You'll thank me later. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the greatest horror movies of all time. I mean, duh, there's going to be spoilers. Other than that, let me know some of your favorite horror movies in the comments. I better not see no Winnie the Pooh. That movie was hot garbage. Yes, Dr. Umar's favorite horror movie, Get Out. The movie starts off with a guy on the phone talking to his girlfriend, and she told him to go to somewhere in the suburbs. And then he was just minding his business, walking his way, until he saw a white car following him. He noticed it and then turned the other way. But when he turned back around, the car door was open. He was confused, then he turned around again and then saw a dude in a black mask come up to him. And before he can even think of anything, he put him to sleep and then dragged him back to his car. Very weird, if you ask me. His girl stood him up. Right after that, we meet a couple named Rose and Chris. And Chris, it's his first time going to meet Rose's parents. He was a little nervous and skeptical because, you know, he was black and her parents are white. And Rose was trying to reassure him by saying that
my dad would have voted for Obama a third time if he could have.
What do you mean by that?
Rose and Chris arrived to their rich parents' house. Then Chris notices the groundkeeper. He just waved. Totally not any weird vibes at all. So Chris meets Dean and the mother. I don't know her name. Dean just asking small talk about how long they've been together and so. Being a protective dad and throwing in some, you know, slight jokes here and there. Then he ended up giving Chris a tour. Then when spasmizing over Jesse Owens, which is a little sus, but we're letting it slide. He gave him a nice tour though. Then we meet Georgina, a maid. Still, sorta no weird vibes. Later on that night, we meet Rose's brother, Jeremy. He seems alright. He gives off some weird vibes here and there, but other than that, he seems like a cool dude. They're just having a good time, you know. They're about to go eat some dessert, some rabbit cake, and the mother's about to go get it. What the fuck? After dinner, Chris and Rose just went to bed, but Chris woke up because of a nasty fly. Since he was awake, he decided to get a quick smoke in before he went back to bed. And as he's about to light one up, he sees this man, Walter, running at him full speed. Like, in that situation, what do you do? This man easily 260 running like a track star, but luckily, he turned the other way. After that weird coincidence, Chris just wants to go to bed. And as he's about to go back to walking upstairs, Missy just turns on the light like Batman in her room. Like, how long was you waiting there? Like, y'all about to give my boy a heart attack. She eventually tells him to sit down and she wants to hypnotize him so he can stop his smoking problems and be relieved of stress. The first question she asked was, where was he when his mom died? He was a little perplexed at first, but he eventually gave in, describing the setting and the story of how he was feeling and what he was doing. Explaining that she was getting groceries and that she died by a hit and run. After he explained the cause of her death, he thinks it's his fault. And after that, Missy tells him how does he feel. He said he can't move, and then she just said, and this man now is in a void in his mind, but he can't move physically. Then my boy wakes up like nothing happened. But it actually did happen, but that's later on in the movie it's revealed. Later that day, they have a house party to go to at their house, which wasn't said for some reason beforehand. And you can tell by the cards, it's going to be a classy party. But when Chris was talking to the guests, it made it seem like they were like auctioning him, like viewing him as a product. And they're just asking him questions about, is it better in the, you know, and saying quotes like black is a new fashion. And just the vibes from these people. Chris thought he had some time to himself until he saw a brother in the distance. But something was off about that man. The way he was acting was just weird. And he's around the same age as Chris, but he's dating someone that's like 40 years older than him. Yeah, Chris had enough. He had to go upstairs. For some reason his phone is always unplugged. And he had to call his boy Rod to tell him how weird this place is. And he was explaining how he was hypnotized by Rose's mom. And immediately, Rod thought of,
People love making people sex slaves and shit.
you know, of course, Chris thought Rod was joking because Rod likes to have a lot of theories. Right after the call, Georgina is always standing in the door and she was trying to apologize to Chris for unplugging his phone. She was just trying to clean the countertop. Chris forgave her, saying it was no big deal. He just feels uncomfortable around white people, is what he told Georgina. And after Chris said that, she paused in her speech and started crying. And it looked like she was trying to say something, but she just ended up laughing, saying no, and just walked out. Like, you good, gang? When Chris came back downstairs, he was asked a question immediately. The question was, is being an African American in America at an advantage or disadvantage? Chris really didn't want to answer the question, so instead he asked Logan King to answer the question, and he said it was a very good experience. Immediately after that, Chris couldn't take it anymore. He had to record this to show to the world, but he forgot to turn his flash off, and then his nose started bleeding.
Get out. Sorry, man. Okay. Get out! Chill, man! Chill!
Oh my gosh, did you hear that? He said the name of the movie. This man is lying through his teeth saying it's a seizure because he flashed his camera. And after a talk with Missy, he's all better. Logan apologized to Chris and the others, and he decided to leave the party. After that, Chris and Rose went out to the woods to talk about what happened. Chris is trying to tell Rose that her dad is lying on what he just saw and that he wants to go home. I understand the brother. The vibes have been off since he pulled in the drive-thru. Eventually, Rose gave in, and they both decided that they were leaving tonight. While that was happening, Dean and the family were playing bingo, but it just seemed unusual. They weren't talking, they were very quiet. I thought it was a normal game, the winner wins a money prize, but they playing bingo for Chris. Like, Chris really got to get out, and the blind guy won. When he got back inside the house, he decided to send Rod the weird video of Logan and his wife. But after that, he got a call immediately by Rod. But he was telling Chris that his name is Dre, well, Andre Hayward. And Rod was explaining to him that he used to mess with a girl, which was Teresa's sister. And that's when Chris remembered him and realized his whole vibe is different. Immediately, Rod tries to warn Chris to leave, and he's not playing around this time. But sadly, Chris's phone dies. Then Rose comes in asking if he's ready to go. Immediately, Chris says yeah. Then Rose leaves the room to go grab the keys. When Rose left, Chris saw a little room with the door open, and Chris let the curiosity get the best of him. So he decided to go in. As soon as he turned on the light, he saw a red box and decided to go through it. He saw young photos of Rose, thought they were cute. Then he looked a little more into it and saw a picture of Rose and a black guy, which looked a little familiar, and said he was the first black guy that she dated. And then he started looking more through it and saw more photos of other guys. And then the last one had a photo of Rose and Georgina, but they looked like a little more than friends, if you ask me. Then it hit Chris that he has got to go. Then Rose is already in the room asking if he's ready. He says yeah, and wants to put the bags in the car, and they both head downstairs. When they came downstairs, the family was already down there, questioning on why he has to leave. Rose gave them an excuse on why Chris has to leave, and they keep asking him more questions, but Chris is just trying to ask Rose for the keys. Still can't find them. Then Dean asks Chris, what is his purpose in life? Just rambling on about death and mortality. And as he keeps rambling, Chris is crashing out asking Rose for those keys. Then Jeremy swings on him with a ratchet. I'm like, hold on, man, don't get dropped now. Then he finally asks Rose calmly, where are the keys? Truth is, she had them the whole time, and she's along with it. And Chris is just in shock. So he realizes that he has to leave by knocking out every single one of them. But as he tried to rush on Jeremy, Missy just tapped her cup, and he seems paralyzed and falls to the ground. Chris wakes up in some random room with the TV right in front of him. Then the screen comes on, and it's the bald guy. The guy who won the bingo tournament, by the way. And he was explaining to Chris what's going on. Basically, Dean is a neurosurgeon, and he's going to transfer the bald guy's brain to Chris's head. So basically, he'll have control over Chris's body, and he really can't do anything about it. He's giving him assurance by saying that he'll be alive, but he won't physically be able to move his body. He did confirm that Jeremy was the strangler, and then Chris' final question was, why black people? He really didn't have an answer, but saying that people want to be stronger, faster, and trendy, but he's just telling him he doesn't care. He just wants to see. And the call hangs up, and then the T thing comes back on, and Chris passes out. After that, Dean and Jeremy are getting ready to do the surgery. Dean tells Jeremy to go get Chris so they can prepare the procedure. When Jeremy enters the room, Chris is still unconscious, knocked out, and he finally unfrees him. And as soon as he turns around and checks on the IV, Jeremy gets a Deontay Wilder hook to the head. I have no idea if he's alive. And how did he not fall asleep to the tea thing? He put the styrofoam in his ears from the couch. After a while, Dean calls out for Jeremy. He's getting a little suspicious on why Jeremy's taking too long. So he ends up leaving the room and goes to check in the hallway. He looked around 2 times, and he glanced back one more time and saw Chris with a deer head. I can't even really explain what he did, but I assume you know what he did. But just letting you know, Dean got sent to the gulag. After that, he just ends up walking up the stairs. And then Georgina spots him and then realizes he probably knows everything that's going on. And so she ran away. After that, he ended up grabbing his phone, so I assume to call the cops. And then sees Missy. Then they have a little stare off and see that teacup. And they both look at each other and they race off to it. And Chris got there first and broke it. So now it's another awkward stare off because now she can't hypnotize Chris. And she know Chris on demon time. So quickly she grabs a knife and stabs Chris in the hand. But it backfires on her because Chris Wick wasn't hugely fazed by this and does a Uno reverse card with the knife knife in his hand. R.I.P. Missy. Then he heads to the door to walk out, and out of nowhere, Jeremy rushes him and puts him in a headlock. Yeah, I don't know how bro's alive. And it's a long headlock. Every time Chris tries to open the door, Jeremy slams it with his foot. So Chris had an idea. The last time he tried to open the door, he was waiting on Jeremy to kick it. And when he did, he stabbed his leg. After that, Jeremy was agonized and in pain and fell to the ground. Afterwards, Jeremy was getting kid boo stomps to the head. Now R.I.P. Jeremy. Now, you may be asking, after all this commotion, where is Rose? Well, she's upstairs with her headphones on, eating dry cereal like a bag of chips. That just shows you right there she belongs right in with this family. And then dipping the cereal like milk and cookies. Like, what is wrong with you? Meanwhile, Chris is trying to get up out of there. So I guess Jeremy was the strangler. As he's driving off, Georgina jumps in front of the car and gets hit. And Rose finally hears a commotion going on. You hear Georgina getting hit by a car outside, but you don't hear your brother getting his head stomped in. But with Georgina being a sister and all, Chris had to go out there and save her. He dragged her back in the car and they drove off. Then Rose come out with the shotgun saying they got grandma. Then Georgina wakes up and you see the surgery scar on her forehead. Then she screams and attacks him, which they just end up crashing in a tree. Chris gains consciousness and realizes that Georgina is now dead. As soon as Chris looks at the side mirror, Rose shoots it. Chris tries to run away but can't. Then Rose calls out for Grandpa, which he ends up tackling Chris and tries to squish his head. But quickly Chris pulled out his phone and took a picture with the flash on. Then Walter stops and gets up and asks Rose for the gun himself. She eventually ends up giving it to him, thinking it was Grandpa, but quickly he shot her straight in the stomach and then shot himself, which that just leaves Chris the last man standing. Rose tries to reach for the gun, but Chris pulls it back from her and ends up on top of her. And one of the last things she said was, "I love you." Chris sadly started choking her until he stopped and saw red flashing lights. Immediately, Rose tries to play victim, but my boy Rod comes out the car, finally finding Chris. And they both end up getting in the police car. And the only question Chris had was, how did he find him? And Rod said,
I'm T.S. motherfucker.